Imagine if there were 30+ million, they keep saying it's 11, or 20, it's well over 20 million illegals in this country. And nobody's saying that a lot of them don't work hard. Nobody's saying that these are bad people overall on average. The issue is they have been brainwashed and they do vote, and I have the poll numbers right here, to take people's guns and to vote for more open borders and socialism and the end of private property rights. And they vote Democratic. And as bad as the Republicans are, they will soon be an extinct fringe party. And I'm going to be breaking that down today. And then Katie, bar the door, because if the establishment can bring in unlimited groups of people that are on the government dole, basically paying for their votes, it's game over. They're having illegals vote all over the country already with driver's licenses that are issued by the states. That's on record. And then if you're against that, you're a racist. Well, I can't go to Mexico and go vote down there as an illegal. I can't get free welfare. If I show up in a Mexican hospital and try to have a baby, they're going to take the money out of me. And if not, they're going to throw the father, and this has happened before, in jail until the family back in El Norte pays it off. In fact, Mexico has some of the most draconian immigration laws in the world. Even the New York Times admits that. So it's totally hypocritical, and the goodwill of the American people is being used here. Just like the goodwill of the American people was used to get Obama elected, and now if you don't agree with what he's doing, you're racist. This is the race politics of the Democratic Party. The problem is all the big Republican associations, the Association of Manufacturing, the Association of Small Businesses, the different associations, the National Chamber of Commerce, are all pushing for this because, well, they push for the banker bailout. They push for gun control. They push for elitism. They push for getting rid of basic freedom in this country. And so you got the Republican leadership for it, the Democratic leadership for it, all these foreign banks for it, all the big blue blood Republican country club people for it, because they want a managed economy and they want to checkmate what's left of the middle class in this country. I mean, has NAFTA and GATT helped America? Did it help Mexico for that matter? No. In fact, in the last 25 years, you can look at the numbers, the top 1% has doubled its wealth. And they're the ones lobbying on average and pushing this whole so-called liberal agenda. It is not a liberal agenda. And I talked about this yesterday. You're a top Nazi collaborator, George Soros, you get ADL awards. If you fight fascism, you're called a Nazi. If you're the Democratic Party, running the Ku Klux Klan until 1963, publicly, then the demographics change. Whites overwhelmingly become anti-segregation and anti-racism. And so you flip and become the party of the minorities. This is a totally sickening joke, and it's a total hoax. And if Boehner and all the rest of these people are able to get what they want, this country is done.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
I was intending to come in here on this live Thursday edition, already the 30th day of January 2014. I was intending to come in here and basically say that legalizing more than 30 million illegal aliens, it's not 11 million, folks, is suicide for this country. And that the Republican Party is going to commit suicide demographically if they pass this. But they probably will. And Obama has already legalized the illegals by fiat and is letting them vote by fiat in race-based politics funded by the Ford Foundation and Carnegie Endowment in the last 60 years to create incredible increased racial animus on folks in Mexico and tell them it's a cultural duty to go to El Norte for La Reconquista, or the reconquering. And then you have the MSNBC crowd who will then continue the radicalization and then tied to that racial animus that is sold and packaged, you will then have attached to it the different sacraments of ban the guns, fully open the borders, get rid of the family, the race to the bottom. And America will fall like California is already falling. That is the game plan. That is the program. And you have the entire Republican leadership supporting it. You have the entire corporate global leadership supporting it because they want desperately poor people. And there's no economic study out there, I've got a stack of them I'm going to cover here in a moment, that doesn't say this won't drive down wages. There isn't a study out there that says this won't lower the standard of living. There's not a study out there that says that this will not cause the total, complete takeover by the Democratic Party of every institution in America. And then they get to have all their social engineering, everything else they're up to. Now remember, the Democratic Party was able to dominate the South because of Lincoln, their enemy, until the early 1960s. And Eisenhower broke their back. People like my grandfather got elected to government in Texas. His father had been a mayor of a major city. He'd been a Democrat. My grandfather bucked it and became a Republican and a pro-Civil Rights Act. That was done all across the country, in every town and city. You saw those actions take place. The Democrats, and I've read the quotes by LBJ and others here on air, said, we've got to now act like we like these minorities and co-opt them, but we'll just play race politics the way we've done with poor whites. That's all it is, and they are master criminals at doing it. And the problem is they're very unpopular, and they could be defeated, but the Republican leadership is bought and paid for by the same interest. There is not a Dwight D. Eisenhower in the Republican Party right now. Those that could be, like a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul, are under unmitigated attack and demonization. And as Pat Buchanan said today, we have an audio clip of this, he said, you know, Boehner will be out as speaker. If he does this, they don't care. He'll get his big payoff. The guy plays golf with Obama constantly. It's all a big sick joke to these people. They're going to be rewarded for doing this, and they've made it a matter of some type of racial pride within the polls I've got at the LePew Research Hispanic Center. 83% of Hispanics think it's a duty in polls conducted by a Hispanic Polling Center in Spanish to take over, quote, America racially. So, see, that's the racial angle, and that's what's been sold. While meanwhile, the average white person is completely politically correct, hates themselves, and would feed their child into a garbage disposal unit if they were told it was something to prove that they're not a bad white person. And that's where all this goes. That's where all this happens. You know, the race issue at the end of the day doesn't even really mean anything. It's just a tribal identification, like Jew versus Palestinian, or Shiite versus Sunni, or black Muslim against black Christian. The globalists just need a dividing line. And this is the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that when I took U.S. history in high school and then in college, all it was a demonization of gringos by white professors, and that America had to be destroyed. Well, the globalists want to destroy it and turn it into North American Union. It'll still have the big military. You'll still have the American flag. It's just we'll be totally conquered politically by a new racial bloc that will be used by the government to then basically menace the other racial blocs. And so we won't have a system based on liberty and freedom and due process and separation of powers and private property. It will be a fully big city, Chicago, New York style area where you'll have regional city council people who are racial. And you'll have the white area, the black area, the Hispanic areas, the Asian areas. And there will be wealth transferences from anyone who's middle class by projecting, that means white people, further socialism and wealth transfer, or you're a racist. Meanwhile, all the big rich people like Bloomberg and the rest of them, they're going to be exempt. The ultimate form of inequality, the ultimate form of discrimination. But the public hasn't been taught about real forms of discrimination and inequality. All they know is white is bad, white is evil, white must be eradicated, prove you're good, don't be white, don't marry somebody white if you're white, because that's racist. Doesn't matter if you're attracted to white people, that's bad. Show yourself as good. And so whites everywhere are engaged in suicide. And my issue is if you love somebody and care about them, that's your issue. I don't have a problem with it. The point is, if it's force-fed, like trying to teach 5-year-olds how to be gay, this is an agenda. And it doesn't matter how many times whites run up the white flag. It doesn't matter how many times we commit suicide culturally. It's never good enough because the globalists want everyone homogenized and no culture. There's no black culture in this country. There's CIA-created hip-hop gangster culture, declassified on record to destroy those people. Look at the Great Society of LBJ and what it did to blacks, from less than 10% illegitimacy to 90+%. This isn't my opinion that Margaret Sanger said all this 90 years ago. It isn't my opinion LBJ said all this. My crew just searched LBJ talking about co-opting the N-words. You can pull up all his letters to members of the House and Senate. You can pull up the National Archive letters of Margaret Sanger, and they've done it. There's a reason the Rockefellers and Rothschilds are in charge. There's a reason Ford and Carnegie endowments are in charge, because they're ruthless, folks. And so you're going to lose your guns. You're going to lose your private property. And while we're all busy fighting with each other over what color we are, while all this is happening, the globalists are destroying every future dream we have across the board. And you've got Obama openly acting as a dictator and the Republican leadership doing nothing about it. You've got Europe being completely overrun with immigrants who are then turned into political groups. I've had members of parliament on from England where most of the social workers are foreigners, literally taking the UK children. I mean, this is a plan. These are like foreign mercenaries. And I'm not demonizing immigrants individually. The globalists see you as like a German soldier, a Hessian mercenary brought here in 1776 on big ships to wage war on the colonies. You are a political, cultural weapon. And hey, when the minorities, who are really the majority in most area, and then the whites are, on average, a completely aging group. I mean, whites will be like 20% of the population in 30 years. And it won't matter. They will always be the enemy. They will always be attacked because that's how they're going to organize the majority that's, quote, minority to then follow all the tyranny and live in squalor and have no freedom, is because it doesn't matter. There'll always be a white pinata to slap around and attack and urinate on. So that's where all this is going. That's the attempt. And it's all happening. You notice the globals are doing everything right now because they know that the entire population is waking up to Obamacare being a scam and waking up to the Federal Reserve being private. And they know the numbers show, quote, minorities are beginning to wake up to things and becoming more libertarian. If that continues another 10, 20 years, they could lose. We could actually educate all these folks. We could educate all the whites about the left-right paradigm. But we don't have that time. And so the globalists are racing right now to get their agenda through. And I'm just going to say this calmly. Imagine any other nation that had conservatively 25 million illegals, probably 30 plus. They always say 11 to 14. The last 8 times they tried to pass this same bill. They did it under Bush. 5 times. They've done it under Obama 3 or 4 times. Maybe it's 9 times. This is the 9th try, is it? And I want you to think about that because the country is already collapsing economically. And if you legalize all these illegals, and in the last bill we saw, let them then bring their families in, we're talking about another 30 million in just a decade. And then it's expected. Food stamps, welfare, don't wear American flags on your shirt. That's hurtful at the San Francisco school. Even Hispanic kids can't wear American flags. I mean, this is all that we're taught. We're being overwritten. We're being totally conquered, and not by Mexico that's totally collapsed into hellhole squalor, the worst in Latin America, but by the globalists just simply using the ghost of some type of La Reconquista as the cultural football game. Again, people get into football games that don't matter. It's the same thing here when that's not even what's happening. It is America being turned into the maquiladores. Alex Jones here with a very important announcement for truth seekers. We've carried a lot of amazing films and books over the years on the online video bookstore at Infowars.com. And out of all the titles we've carried, one stands out because it is just so chillingly convincing. And that's Dreams from My Real Father by Joel Gilbert, available at Infowars.com. This film exposes the fraud that Obama is like nothing I've seen. If you want to know who Obama's real daddy is, this is the film for you. Don't forget, your purchase supports our broadcast and our growing media network. You'll also find at InfoWarsShop.com, None Dare Call a Conspiracy by Gary Allen, the book that woke me up. We're also carrying Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21 by Rosa Corey. This book is coffin nails to the globalist takeover. The Greater Good, the most professional and up-to-date film I've ever seen exposing the scourge that is vaccines. These titles and a lot more are all available at InfoWarsShop.com. The average, quote, minority who's an immigrant or has become a citizen even recently, 80+%, vote for socialism, for communism, for literally taking my guns, taking your guns. And I'm sorry, people on average that come from China, people that come from Mexico, people that come from Eastern Europe, folks that come from all over, they're not used to owning guns, and they're used to the government telling them what to do. And man, the government's going to give them some free welfare and stuff. And MSNBC tells them the white Americans hate you. Show them, get their guns. And they go, the government's my friend. All right, I'm with the big government now. I'm going to vote to take everything you got. I'm going to vote for higher taxes on you. And then it's a bunch of offshore criminal banks publicly militarizing the police, setting up martial law, making the presidency a dictatorship, and using outside groups to come in and get free everything and vote to take our guns, our children, everything. The Democrats are going to bring in a national draft, too. We're going to have to serve them as military slaves. We're going to have to supply our kids to the empire now. I mean, this is a sick system, folks, where you can bring people in to vote to make people slaves. That's why we have a Bill of Rights, so that people can't vote. Democracy, a pure democracy, is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. If there were two wolves and a sheep, one was named Bob, one was Ralph, and one was Tom. Okay, and Tom is the sheep. The other two guys, the wolves, vote, and the sheep says, well, I'd like to eat some grass. And the wolves say, you know what? We're going to veto that. There's two of us. Mutton's on the list here, lamb chops. Lamb chops. And we're like, hey, it's democracy. Don't be racist, sheep, against the wolves. And this is how the globalists have always operated. When the Democrats were the majority in the Ku Klux Klan, they ran their political systems to oppress whites by saying, well, at least we protect you from the blacks. And then when the whites didn't put up with that, they said, okay, we'll be the racial politics now with the minorities. And it's just sick. And by the way, all those folks on MSNBC know exactly what they're doing. Just like George Soros knew what he was doing when he was a teenager, running around collaborating, ferreting out hidden Jews. But he's a liberal and gets awards from the Jewish groups. Because if you are a Nazi collaborator, you're good. If you fight a modern fascist takeover, you're bad. And you've just got to learn this, folks. You've got to learn how the mafia government works. So truth is self-evident. That's why I was going to come on air today and say the Republicans are committing suicide, and this is a public execution of the Republic. And look at all the other stuff that accompanies this. What message does it send if you tell tens of millions of illegals here that are already legal, they do a few show deportations, that are already here illegal? What does it do if you say you're legal even if you're a felon? You come in and pledge you won't be a felon anymore. Kind of like John Corzine. But if you're deaf and walking away from the police, they'll kill you. That's okay, but you know, if you're illegal aliens committing felonies, that's all right. Aggravated felons, rapists, arsonists, you name it, they get to be legal too. Read the legislation. What's going to happen with 700 million Latin Americans, because that's the group that can get here the easiest? What's going to happen when 700 million Latin Americans hear that? Well, you already see a record influx of illegals pouring in. And man, I'm tired of reading in the back of the paper where people are getting mugged and carjacked and killed and on the ranches. I know 3 different people that have been deer hunting the last 2 years in South Texas. We're talking 50, 100 miles away from the border, who have been mugged in the dark walking to their deer stands or attacked at gunpoint, even though they have a gun in the deer stand, and robbed and pistol whipped by illegals.
Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at Infowars.com/show.